everyone, welcome back to a place where you know our name. That's where we want to go, right? We're talking about some great shows today. My name's Matt,
And Brian.
and like I said, we're talking about The Chosen and Cheers, two shows that start with the letter CH. You're welcome.
Yep.
No, that's all I'm giving you.
And brought to you by the number 7.
There you go. Hey, actually, speaking of things I'm giving you, okay, so we have talked before about like how rich our knowledge is, and and most of our viewers, I would think, know that I have another podcast. I'm not planning on starting another podcast, but I was trying to think of like if I did, what would be another well of stuff that I know and I can talk about that I'd start a podcast about. So I wanted to throw that question your way first with no preparation, didn't say anything before we started. You now have to come up with, if you had another podcast, what would you talk about?
For me to do or for you to do?
Yeah. I know what I would pick.
Okay. I think for me, if I were doing my own, it probably would be more of like a specialized knowledge. Like I always bring up Muppets and Power Rangers, and I could do one of those topics. I think especially Muppets. It's like 50 years worth of stuff, whether it's like just reviewing different movies and specials every time. The only thing is that I'm not sure if there'd be an audience for that, but
Welcome to the Muppet Podcast. Phenomena.
I mean, I do listen to some Muppet podcasts, but those are hosted by some of the more famous Muppet fan sites. So they have a built-in audience already.
Sure, that makes sense. For me, like if I did a specialized knowledge, like I've said before, I know so much about Back to the Future. I can talk about that for hours on end. But I think I would probably pick in terms of like a bigger medium, because like I have movies I talk about, I have TV I talk about. A bigger medium for me that I love is Disney theme parks.
Mm-hmm.
I love theme. I mean, I would probably bring up some like, because I've been to Disney World a lot. I'd probably bring up some like Universal Studios stuff down there as well, because they're a very strong competitor.
Yeah.
But I bring it up because there's a really awesome show on Disney Plus that just dropped a couple episodes on Wednesday for the first time. It reminds me of another one they had, but it's called Behind the Attraction. Did you happen to see anything about that?
I haven't yet.
It's really good. It's a documentary where it talks about, right now it's got 5 episodes. I don't know if they're going to do more. I didn't even look into it. I hope they do. But right now it has 5 episodes, 5 different things. They talk about Space Mountain, Jungle Cruise, Haunted Mansion, Star Tours, and Twilight Zone Tower of Terror. So those are the 5 episodes that are out right now. And it just really goes into depth about these rides, like how they came to be, audience or people's responses to them, the pitfalls, the fun parts of it, the legacy, all that sort of stuff.
That's actually really cool. This is way back when I worked at Mall of America. So this was years ago, but I was watching on YouTube. I'm not sure if it's still there. It's like an hour-long documentary on the making of the Jurassic Park ride at Universal, and it was really interesting. So this is the stuff that we find interesting, guys.
I know. It's like, to me, I'm like, this is so awesome. I love like these anecdotes. Like there's one anecdote about the Haunted Mansion that before it was built in Disneyland, because it sat dormant, actually, the facade sat dormant for 10 years. Like they knew they were going to do a Haunted Mansion thing, but they just could not figure out how the right balance of scary and funny to strike and exactly the storyline they'd go with. Or even like the ride system. They didn't have a ride system. They thought it was going to be like a walk-through attraction for a while, that they might do it that way. So they didn't know exactly what they were going to do. So it just sat there and they're like, oh, we're compiling ghosts. We're getting ghosts coming here, blah, blah, blah. That's the sign that they had up front. And that's how they justified things in the 50s. But it's funny, they had some ideas of stuff. And so one of these Imagineers had like this room that he had all of this spooky, unusual, creepy stuff in. And he gets like this note, or the like HR comes and talks to him, and they're like, the janitors have requested that you keep the lights on in this room at night, because they have to go in there and clean it, and they don't want to go into that spooky room with all that creepy stuff in the dark. So if you could do that. So he's like, okay, sure. And then he's like, no, I'm going to have fun. So he sets a timer at night for like everything to suddenly turn on and light up all at once when the janitors are in there. And so then HR comes in the next day. They're like, they have said they are not going to go back into that room ever again, and that you have to read it from now on.
That's hilarious.
That's great. Like, I would love to see the reaction of them freaking out in that.
Yeah, I think he should have also set up a camera. Of
Yes,
course,
he
then to
should have.
release it, he'd probably have to like legally get releases and all that. But
Now, keep in mind, this was the 50s, so
I
cameras were
suppose
like the size of half of a human. So it'd
true.
be hard to do that. So yeah, that's Behind the Attraction. Check that out. I don't usually recommend shows on here and like, hey, let me plug it. Check it out if you got a Disney Plus subscription. And while you're doing that, check out the Imagineering story, which is the same thing, except for it's like 6 episodes of the whole history of every Disney park and like Disney entertainment on that. So it starts at the inception of the idea, bringing it all the way up to like 2020, Star Wars Land, Toy Story Land,
Yeah,
etc.
that's cool.
Yeah, it's really good.
If I was going to make a recommendation, I saw the new Space Jam a couple days ago. Actually, it's pretty good. You seen that yet?
Yeah, it's a weird it's
Yeah.
a weird thing because it's like it is very kid cheesy friendly,
Hmm.
but it's like it's the same, it's kind of the same cloth as the original Space Jam. The thing for me, it gets really interesting once they get into the serververse,
Yeah.
because before that happens, like one of the guys that's the comic part of it is this guy named Malik, and his shtick is like, I'm going to say things that teens say, but I'm going to show that I'm so out of touch. And I'm like, I hate that joke. I just
Hmm.
hate it. Isn't things lit? Look at me using old young people's words when I'm old. Like, okay, shut up, guys.
Yeah. What got me is when they mentioned like they referenced the original a couple times. They say like, "Oh, it's been 25 years." And I was like, "Crap, I'm old. It has been 25 years." I remember seeing the original one in the theaters too.
I will say, if you don't see Space Jam, The New Legacy, which is completely fine for me,
Yeah.
again, it's family friendly and it's something great for the kids to watch, and it has enough for adults to keep them entertained. But
Mhm.
if you're like, I don't want to waste energy on that, there's at least about like a 10-minute section in the middle of the movie where they're assembling the team and they have to go to all of these different Warner Brothers properties and
Mhm.
a bunch of movies that I did not expect to be referenced in the Space Jam movie
Like Austin
are
Powers.
referenced.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, don't ruin it.
Well, I know it was gonna be a
But yes,
secret.
I was like, oh, there's that. So yeah, I it caught me by surprise and I
Yeah.
enjoyed that.
Two little tidbits there. So they were originally going to have Pepe Le Pew be one of the team. That cut him out because of the whole sexual harassment stuff that goes along with his cartoons.
Yeah, he is not one of those that is okay for now.
Yeah. Instead, you get Gossamer, who's like this big red furry guy, who's like one of the least known Looney Tunes. And it's like
Yeah.
they only have a limited number of characters. They include him. All right, cool, whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's room for Pepe Le Pew if you don't have like
The
his
cat, yeah.
inappropriate advances in there,
Mhm.
even though that's a big portion of his character. I feel like because they had Speedy Gonzalez in there,
Mhm.
who is a little bit too much of a Mexican caricature. I
Mhm.
felt like, okay, if you're gonna go that route, you kind of can't do Speedy Gonzalez then.
But do you know who did the voice of Speedy Gonzalez?
Who?
Gabriel Iglesias, Fluffy.
That makes sense. I
Yep.
thought his kind of sounded a little familiar.
Yep. I will say so. Tweety Bird is the only Looney Tune that has the same voice actor as the original Space Jam.
Oh, this is the other thing. I did not like Bugs Bunny in this. I felt like they took Bugs's character and made him too selfish and too much of a jerk.
Me too.
Bugs has always been a little selfish and a little narcissistic, but he had this lovability about him that you still are like, I can't be mad at you. Like he wins you
Yeah.
over, even though he makes he makes very selfish decisions. In this movie, he did still, but I wasn't drawn into his charm. He didn't have that
Yeah.
like
Well,
others
yeah.
had.
Well, in the first one, his pushiness kind of came from like, hey, if we don't win this, we're gonna all be slaves. So I get it. And the second one, it's more his like, my friends left, and I want to manipulate them to come back.
Yeah. I mean, even in the original cartoons, like he was, all about himself and he was that sarcastic, like, oh, this guy did he look like this and look like this and acted like this? No, I've never heard of him. Like, what a jerk.
Yeah.
You're funny. So I like you.
Yeah. So this is our Space Jam podcast.
Yeah. We're talking about Cheers and Chosen because obviously talking about Disney shows or Disney rides and Space Jam. that ties in really well.
All right. Should
No,
we jump
we can
into Chosen or the Cheers first?
let's do Cheers. Why
Okay.
not?
All right.
So I watched the episode from season 6 called Bar Wars. Now, in Bar Wars, you had the Cheers bar has celebrating this 2-year anniversary of the last time they defeated this other bar owned by this bar owner named Gary. So they call him up and they're like, "Hey Gary, it's been 2 years since we defeated you guys at bowling." They've apparently had all these competitions in a long time, but they have not done anything in 2 years because they don't want to do something else and then like lose. They're like, "We're stuck in time here where we are the most recent winners."
Yeah.
So then Gary sabotages the trophy they got from bowling, and then they go show up, and then they start escalating these pranks and get to a point of let's see who can one up the other the best. So this was my first exposure to Cheers, and I I had a vague idea of all of the characters. I at least knew like all the actors because like I've seen George Wendt before, I've seen Rhea Perlman before, etc. Like
Yeah.
all of the main cast. It's amazing how much of the main cast has gone on to other things. Even John Ratzenberger, he might be the least of those celebrities, but he's in like all the Pixar films.
Yeah.
So still, so it's actors that I knew, but characters that I didn't.
Mhm.
And so it was a little bit of like, I'm just trying to understand, okay, what is their deal? All that I really got was for personalities was Kelsey Grammer's Frasier as the pompous,
Yeah.
stuffed up, technically correct sort of guy, and Woody Harrelson as the doofus, which he was to me my favorite things from this episode all had to do with Woody Harrelson.
Yeah. Woody was great, and that's the great thing about Frasier is Frasier was brought in as a side character to the previous female lead who didn't see played by Shelley Long. She, at the beginning before she left the show, her and Sam were like the big couple, and he was brought in kind of to serve the same purpose as like Karen from The Office. Like you wouldn't think he'd last longer, but then he actually lasted on the show longer than Diane did, and then got his own stories and then his own spin-off. So it's like, imagine Karen being on the Office longer than Pam. That's kind of what happened with Cheers.
That would be weird, and especially because he had a Beauty and the Beast haircut.
Yeah, yeah. I told you his hair is ridiculous in this episode.
I just he looked like he did look like it was like a combination of the Beast from Beauty and the Beast and Cogsworth's character, when he grows up,
Oh yeah.
like their hair combined. That's
Mhm.
the power of Kelsey Grammer's mullet, I want to say.
Mhm.
I don't know exactly what you call that hairstyle, but I'm going with mullet. Woody had the funniest stuff. I liked when Walter Boggs shows up and he's like, "I'm Walter Boggs," and George Wendt's like, "Well, I'm Babe Ruth," and Cliff was, "I'm this other," and then Woody's like, "Well, I'm Woody." His character in the show, for those who haven't seen Cheers, his name's Woody as well.
Yeah.
He just instead of taking a baseball player's name, I'm Woody.
Mhm.
I also liked the poetry infiltration that they do. One of the gags that they pull for a prank is they hack into their cable, if you want to say hacking for the 80s. They take control of the other bar's cable and they put up Cliff and Norm on the screen reading poetry instead of like this big fight that was on TV, and telling everyone to cheers if they want to watch the fight. I liked that as well. But I was not. I honestly anticipated more humor in this show, and I think it was just I wasn't accustomed to that time period's humor quite at the right.
Mhm.
Because it's like the 80s does have their own type of humor. A lot of decades, when you look at the humor, it does have its own sense of humor. And the sense of humor in the show is very 80s sitcom-y.
Yeah.
And there's some good stuff in it, but there's like being where we are now in the present and going into it from having never watched Cheers before, that lost me a little bit. I
get that. And there's probably some other episodes I maybe could have shown you, but what I liked about this episode, it kind of just shows kind of like the team aspect, and like these guys are all really immature, but they're also like in their own ways, like they're living their own lives, doing their own thing, but they hang on like this 2-year bowling trophy, and nobody's ironic about it. Everyone's like, yeah, this is so great, we won bowling. And especially Sam, like Sam is put himself upon as like this, like I'm this cool guy, like no one can touch me, whatever. But when it comes down to it, his ego is shown. Like his ego is easily bruised when with the slightest little thing, and it just kind of like shows their character dynamics, which I think is really cool. And even Frasier, he said Frasier likes to think of himself as more intellectual, but the longer he's on the show, the more and more he gets sucked into their world, and he's just one of them by the end.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely could see parts of that with his character of like saying he's above it, but still being just right in the throes of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like with a character like that, you kind of have to be that way. I mean, like, we've talked a lot about How I Met Your Mother because it's a good litmus point for us.
Yeah.
But Ted kind of has that personality where, he's got the I'm above all of this, but he's almost like the worst one in some of the things that they do and some of the stupid choices that they do as a group.
Yeah. And then also just to explain Kirstie Alley. So at this point, I think the previous season, this is the first season without Shelley Long. So the previous seasons, Sam owned the bar, and he sold the bar to go run after Diane. Then when he came back, this corporation bought the bar, and Kirstie Alley's character Rebecca was the manager, and Sam at this point is just hired on as a bartender. He later on gets the bar back. I forget all the details there, but and it's kind of where Rebecca as a character is kind of a weak point. Like she's not really that interesting, but I like the later years better for the fact of it focuses less on the Sam and Diane aspect of it.
Yeah, I could definitely see a bit of Rebecca's character of like, I don't quite fit in with this group yet. And I did appreciate that she had both the voice of reason a little bit in it, but at the same time as the episode was going on, she was like, well, just so that I can be a part of this group and so that we can kind of have a bar camaraderie, sure, I'll jump into that. And also maybe she was pushed into it because of like some of the pranks that were done against him, like, okay, maybe we should get revenge. So, I can appreciate that on a story level of what they did with her character for this episode.
Yeah. All right. You have any other thoughts on Cheers?
I don't. I don't know if I'll be coming back to Cheers anytime soon. I would rather watch IT Crowd, more of that, or watch more Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. I bring both those episodes up or both those shows up because those are other ones you've had me watch, and I've only watched one of each. And I'm like, if I'm going to continue on in one of these shows that you've recommended, it's going to be one of those, probably IT Crowd, because I think I do like British humor more than your average person.
Yeah, I can see Cheers being a one where maybe it's like spotty, like maybe I'll give you a Thanksgiving episode at some point or something like that. But on average, I think Cheers I do have ranked lower than both Fresh Prince and the IT Crowd.
Well, there you go. I mean, there's I could be doing worse. I could be watching through The Big Bang Theory with my wife, who decided we don't have a show we're watching right now, so let's watch The Big Bang Theory.
I don't hate The Big Bang Theory. I actually have most of the seasons on DVD, but I think about the first half of the shows is actually interesting, and then it just kind of gets stale and like not as interesting in the end.
Yeah, it's a show that I don't hate to have on. Like I'm at the point, because she'll watch Friends a lot. I'm at the point when like I don't really want her watching Friends in front of me just because like I've seen it so many times. I know. So you Friends fans out there, that's almost a blasphemy. But I've seen it a lot. That's a show that I don't need to see as much as some other people see. Like I can watch The Office over and over and over a lot. I can definitely watch New Girl over and over and over, and she'll have that like those on and repeat. But Friends, I'm like, okay, I could use a break from Friends for now. So having Big Bang Theory on is not the worst thing in the world.
No,
but it's not a show I'm itching to get to.
I would say one episode of Big Bang Theory that I think works really well is Raj sets everybody else up on this big scavenger hunt. And what I like about it, they actually set up different pairings. You set Leonard and Bernadette, Sheldon and Penny, and then Howard and Amy. So you get different pairings that you don't normally get, and actually works really well because like I don't really ever see these two characters together. And now let's just put them together.
I vaguely remember that episode, and I can, like you said, I can appreciate when they have different pairings. I like that one Community episode where what is it, Abed and Britta, I think, are talking, or maybe it's Annie. But one of Abed's like, I've always considered us to be like Phoebe and
Oh,
Chandler,
yeah.
that we don't have any meaningful storylines together. And so he thinks about it for a second. He's like, okay, Chandler, like that.
Yeah.
Phoebe.
It makes him so, yeah. That little nugget makes that joke so much better. But it's true, a lot of these
Yeah,
times in these friend groups, they're like the natural pairings, but it's like, really, in all these years, these two who always hang out never break off and hang out together?
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yep. How I Met Your Mother did it in a worse extent with Lily, no, with Marshall and Robin, where they
Yeah.
did an episode about that. I think that was a manatee episode, I want to
Oh yeah,
say.
they made a point to say that they would never be romantically involved,
Yeah,
which duh, but whatever.
exactly.
All right,
All
so
right.
I watched Jesus TV called The Chosen.
And what did you think? You watched, you go ahead and tell us about it.
It was interesting. Yeah, so I watched an episode called was it called Jesus Loves Little Children?
Yep.
All right, so it's about this family back in Jesus times, and this little girl tells her mom, "Hey, I'm gonna go play," and her mom, like twice, she says like, "No swimming," which I thought that was gonna turn into something, but that never came back. Like, why does she not get to swim? But she wanders off and she finds this guy, which I don't think he's ever explicitly said to be Jesus, but he's basically Jesus. She just kind of spies on him at his camp and just is like, is super intrigued. There's this guy here, and she goes to her friend. Yeah, there's this guy there, and he's like super nice. And then she brings her friend the next day. The next day, she talks to her mom, and she's like, "Hey, can I bring Joshua to the park or whatever?" And again, her mom's like, "Yes, but no swimming," which whatever. And then I'm just
You
caught up with
really,
that
you were ready for her to start drowning and Jesus to like have to save her.
or something. Like, why bring in the detail and have a callback for it if you're never going to do anything with it? Um, but what I like about this, so Joshua and the girl Abigail, I think is her name,
Okay.
and they they're talking as they go over there, and she's like, he seems like a nice guy. I don't think he would kill us. And he's like, you don't think this stranger would kill you, and you're like,
And it's fun about her is like she's talking just like how a kid would talk.
yeah.
She's like has all these run-on sentences where she's asking Joshua like 30 questions in a row, and then like at the end of it, she's like, "Hurry up, we're almost there. Keep up."
Yeah, exactly. And at one point, she even says like, "Hey, do you have a sword?" Just like, I don't see a sword. I don't think he'll kill us. It's like, maybe be a little bit more sure about that before you go. But I mean, because they
She's
don't
like
know
8,
they don't know it's Jesus.
but they can tell. They can feel it in their heart, man. That's the whole point.
Yeah, I mean that is the point they're trying to make is that, like, she can sense this peace about him, and then so they go there, they hang out with. I'm just gonna call him Jesus. They go hang out with Jesus, and he explains like, yeah, I don't haven't make any money. I just make things and I exchange it for what I need, and I go from city to city and do what I need. And they're like super intrigued by this, and they're like asking him all his questions, and he's like, "Are you a carpenter?" He's like, "Well, sometimes." And then he's like, "But I have a purpose that's much bigger than just building things." And it's like they come back the next couple of days with like a whole group of kids, and it's like Jesus hanging out with all these kids. And I love the one scene that he's sleeping and they wake him up, and he's like, oh, "You couldn't have waited 30 more minutes, huh?" Like, even Jesus experiences kids waking you up.
I like that you got to hear Jesus make a fart noise, not like actual fart, but like for the kids. You like just
Oh
go.
yeah. Oh yeah, the first night when it was just her and Joshua, they're hiding behind a wall, and he knows they're there, and he's trying to like get them to be get them to come out and not be scared. So he's making fart noises and stuff, and like as the kids are laughing, what's that noise? That doesn't sound like sheep. And then as they're going, it turns into like this Sunday school lesson where they're asking questions about like morality and stuff they've been taught. And like after every question, Abigail's like the teacher's pet who's like raise her hands. And then at one point he's even like, let's see if somebody else knows the answer.
But he does it in a very good Jesus fashion.
Yeah. And Matt, so Jesus references, he says, I had to go into town and help a woman who needed help. Do you know which Bible story? I'm guessing it's referencing a specific Bible story.
It's actually referencing. So this is a filler episode. This isn't just like a one-off. It feels like if you just watch this episode, and that's why I gave it to you
Mhm.
because there's honestly arcs throughout these seasons. It is like the type of TV show to have characters like Jesus isn't even in the first episode until like the very last scene,
Mhm.
and like you wouldn't even believe you. I don't think you would guess, but who do you think is my favorite character arc in the first season that they go through? They're telling the story of Jesus, remember, and his
Mhm.
disciples. So who do you think is my favorite character arc?
Peter.
Nicodemus.
Hmm.
Nicodemus in the first season. Like we know very little about Nicodemus if we look at just the Bible in general,
Mhm.
but it ends up being like a major character in the first season. And what they do with his character is really intriguing. And so what they do with the chosen, this is the reason why I gave it to you is because this is like the best Christian media I have ever seen in my life. And it actually rivals to me, the writing rivals, even though they bring up swimming and they don't do anything with it. Besides that, the
Yeah.
writing rivals some of the best shows on TV, in my opinion. And they're able to give, like you see in this episode, what I love about this one is you see this humanity to Jesus that you don't always get to think of when it comes to how Jesus was on earth. Because if you think about, oh, Jesus had humanity, it can get to a point where you have like a movie like The Last Temptation of the Christ, where they take it too far. And it's like, well, just because Jesus had humanity, he still was perfect. And so you get to see Jesus in his humanity. And I felt like this episode really highlighted that without like bringing Jesus down. So you get to see Jesus have human reactions to things, but to still not sin while having those human reactions, to still do things differently. And it takes some of these other Bible stories too, and it kind of, it'll definitely add different stuff. It adds characters that aren't
Mhm.
in the Bible just so that it can flesh it out a little bit more. And even the first episode says this is intended to direct you to the Bible and for you to read the Bible on your own. Like don't not everything that happens. This is historical fiction.
Yeah.
That's what you're watching.
Yeah.
And that's a hard line. I'm to be honest, like anyone who has ever been to a church or multiple churches knows how touchy some theology can be for certain denominations. So when you
Mhm.
say, hey, this is Jesus, let me present him on the screen, you have to present a Jesus that Baptists and Methodists and Catholics and non-denominationals, et cetera, that they can all agree on that, yes, this is how Jesus would be. So they
Yeah.
have to find the right tone while adding extra stuff to make it a solid show narratively.
Yeah.
And to me, I think they nail it.
Yeah. You can't just have Jesus look at the camera and be like, "Hey, only Baptists are right."
Well, he does. No, I'm just kidding.
Interesting things like it's an interesting story, and not a lot like narratively happens. Basically, I've told you everything that Jesus just hangs out with kids on the whole episode, and I was wondering, I was expecting it to be a thing where some of the kids' parents show up and be like, "Why are you hanging out with our kids unattended?" or something. I thought maybe that would happen, and it's just there's a lot of different ways they could go with that.
Yeah. And this episode, it's the third in the season. It makes me third in the series overall. It makes me think that someone had this idea for this episode early on,
Hmm.
and they're like, "We need this, and we need this early on before Jesus starts bringing his disciples to him." Because I mean, Jesus doesn't even call his first disciple for until after this episode's done, and
Hmm.
this is the third episode. So you you have season one is 8 episodes. You're like, well, how how much are they taking their time with the story of Jesus? They end the season one at a certain story, and you're like, well, that's really early on. They still have a lot of Jesus stuff to go. How long are
Yeah.
they planning on going with this?
Yeah,
So
Jesus mentions like, "Oh, I'm going to be traveling more. I'm going to make more friends." And they're like, "Well, what if people don't like you?" He's like, "Well, a lot of people won't." And he's
yeah,
like being like super honest with them.
yeah. I really like the question one of the kids asked, like, "Are you dangerous?" He's like, "Maybe to some, but not to you." And I'm like, "Oh, there you go. That's a great answer."
Yeah. And then it ends with Abigail goes to see him, and he had abandoned his camp area, but he left behind a note and like a little toy farm area that he made with a note saying, I don't only make things for the wealthy, because he made a comment earlier like, yeah, I make things for this people and this kind of people, and wealthy people like love to buy toys for their kids. And she's like, oh, well, my family's not wealthy. And at the end,
Yeah.
he's like, kind of brought around, like, well, that's okay. I'll still make you stuff.
Yeah. It's a very endearing part of Jesus. Like, if you have a different show and this is your first introduction, because really I'm trying to think of the second episode. I don't think Jesus was that prevalent in the second episode either. So I think this was the first episode that really gave him screen time. And then from then on, you have a lot more of him throughout the series. So I think this, in a way, being your first elongated exposure to this character, like, again, this works in a narrative sense. This is a great way to endear you to a character and be like, oh, look at how he is with kids. Because I mean, you hear people talk about like red flags in relationships. Like, look at how they are with waitresses or waiters. Look at how they are with people that can't do anything for them, to be honest. And so, like, yeah, kids can kind of do things for him. He was teaching them, and he had them help along with some of the stuff he was doing. But I mean, he's the adult, so of course, how it is as an adult. Like, the kids you don't serve kids; kids serve you, in a way. That made me sound like that did not come out right. I could not think of a way to phrase that. And
Matt's got his kids being servants at his house there.
That's true. Just, if you come over and you see me putting whips away, then that makes sense now. So I don't beat my kids. I don't do it, guys.
You went to a darker level. I was just gonna say, come over, and all his kids are in little tuxedos answering the doors like Jeffrey the butler.
Oh yeah, yep. I did go to a darker place. This whole train went downhill quickly.
I don't even have to say anything. Matt will dig himself in a hole and put himself in it.
Oh no, my parachute is a knapsack.
You talked about me editing yourself to make you look bad. You do that on your own without any editing.
That's so true. I'm like, no, that's not what I mean. I mean this worst thing. No, wait, that's not what I mean. I mean this worst thing. You know what? I'm done. I'm out. All right. Hey, did you like this exposure enough that you're like, I would be up for watching more episodes of this from the beginning?
I would. And if for no other reason than I can keep my record of watching the whole series of all of these that you give me.
Well, the nice thing about it is I give you short shows. Like, I gave you Firefly, which had one season. I gave you this, which currently has only 2 seasons. The second season just finished, and they put it online like a week and a half ago. So you've got 16 episodes here. Well, 15. You've already watched one. You give me Cheers, which had, 11 seasons?
Yes, but I also give you IT Crowd, which wasn't that long, and Fresh Prince only had six seasons. But yeah, Cheers had 11 seasons. And if you want to keep going, you could watch Frasier for another 11, so 22 seasons.
Now, it's my own dang fault that I'm in the middle of like a series like Impractical Jokers, which has a lot of episodes, and or another series that I'm in is The Simpsons, which has 32 seasons. So
You're actually watching those all the way through?
Yeah, I'm at the end of season 4 for Simpsons. I like my job because I'm able to watch that while I'm at my job. So I watch. I can't, like, I love The Simpsons, but I can't really do more than 4 or 5 episodes in a day.
So I've talked about my TV show ranking, and I just updated and added Better Call Saul into the mix because I haven't ranked it yet. It's in the unranked list at the bottom. There's still 9 shows that just this year alone I've gotten into and added into the system.
Nice.
Firefly and Chuck are one of them. Yep.
You're welcome. Yep. Mm-hmm. You wouldn't be here without me. And now Chosen will be there too. You're going to watch it. Okay. Peter, you talk about Peter. Peter does have a good arc, but I really love what they do with Matthew. Matthew has a great arc because they make Matthew's character. He has a version where he's on the spectrum. They don't really, because there wasn't very good mental health awareness back then. They just call him different, but his actions and how he does things, he is definitely on the spectrum. And it works because he's a very detail-oriented tax collecting numbers work for him. And it's really interesting to see this character on screen. Like, they do a great job with some of these characters. So
I'll have to check that out. Ironic, because Matthew is my least favorite character on the TV Guys podcast.
How ironic. It's a good joke. I don't like you.
You don't have to like me.
Good, I guess, because I don't. So
So,
let's talk about trivia because
well,
Brian
before we do
stinks.
that, yeah, before we do that,
What?
we'll have to see if Matt will let me do another one of these because I've already told him what I'm going to do for the next time we do this.
Oh, geez. Yeah, I need to figure out a show that's terrible. I'm gonna have you watch Beavis and Butthead.
All right. It's worth it to get you
I
to watch
I've
Gilmore
never
Girls.
watched any of it. I've never watched any of it, so I don't know.
Yes, we can go to trivia. So last week I talked about Christopher Kennedy Masterson, who played Francis on Malcolm in the Middle, and he had two famous brothers. Now, Matt, you said you knew one of them.
Danny Masterson from That 70s Show. He played Hyde. He's
Yep.
also in real life, he is a scumbag Scientologist rapist guy. So
Yeah, he's also, and because of the reasons that he was terrible, he's also killed off of the ranch too.
yep,
So you don't know who the third one is?
I don't know.
I think it might be a half brother, but still works. It's Jordan Masterson, who was Ryan on Last Man Standing.
Oh yeah. Oh, really?
Yeah, you can kind of see it if you look at the face.
Yeah. Yeah, because all the Mastersons, you can see it in all their faces. You can
Yeah.
see the similarity. Yeah.
I haven't heard anything about Chris or Jordan being terrible people, but we don't know. Hopefully not.
I thought I heard something about Chris that he was like complicit or something with what Danny's doing. I hadn't heard anything about Jordan because again, I don't really know much about him. But also, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. So
All right.
I don't want to say stuff because it's so easy to speculate and then someone gets that in their mind and they run with it and be like, oh yeah, this person is a terrible person when there's zero like reason to believe that.
Yeah.
So,
All right. So my trivia this week goes back to Cheers. And as we mentioned, Cheers spun off the successful spin-off Frasier. And throughout Frasier, there's different episodes where cast members from Cheers will make guest appearances. Like, hey, I'm visiting Frasier. So out of all the living cast members, that excludes Coach, who obviously died during the run of Cheers. Out of all the living series regulars of Cheers, there's only one that never made any appearances in Frasier. So the question is, who was the living cast member from Cheers who never went on to be in Frasier?
I know this, or I am trying to remember because we've actually talked about this, and you brought this trivia up.
Yeah,
like,
I know.
about a month ago, and I'm trying to remember who it was.
I thought it was longer than that. So I figured it'd be long. I thought it was way back when we talked about TV theme songs because I brought up the Cheers theme. So I was hoping that it was long enough ago that people forgot.
No, I think we were talking about it like in your garage when we were moving. I think that's when it came up. So I don't put
gotcha.
it up on here, but I think you've brought it up to me. So I'm trying to remember to see how good my memory is.
Right,
I'm also getting old, so who knows? Well, hey, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. If you get a chance, go watch Cheers. It's on Paramount Plus, or go watch The Chosen, which has its own free app. You can download a Chosen app or go on, I think it's chosentv.com or something like that. It is completely free to watch Chosen. Cheers does require a Paramount Plus subscription or the DVDs. Or, if you're one of those old-fashioned people that just tries to find it on cable, do that.
Yeah.
Or go on Disney Plus and watch The Imagineering Story or Behind the Attraction.
Or Loki.
Or Loki. What else? I think those are all the shows we talked about. You've got a lot of opportunities to watch things. Enjoy them, watch them. Until next time, I'm Matt.
I'm Brian.
And reminding you to stay tuned and keep watching.